I didn't like it because he had other children and he was still doing the same, dealing with drugs.
Handled, that it was robustly litigated.
A heavy burden feels lifted. I feel like now we can start trying to heal.
I don't think so, and hopefully that will change.
Should there be?
There should be.
If they want to be convinced they're brainwashed into what they believe, then fine, then go ahead and kill me.
One of the issues that was never really addressed and clarified at trial.
And I had been up for almost a week doing meth, bits and pieces, or what I remember.
What their mindset was. They were out a long time.
Like, he's very special to me. He cares deeply for me.
A jury in Marion County is recommending the death penalty for a man who killed his wife and 4 children.
Status that you qualify for the public defender's office, so I'm going to appoint the public defender to represent you.
Michael had been sexually abused by his step-uncle. He was about 5 or 6.
I think I'm going to ask you guys to leave.
Okay, well, we're walking right out the front door right now.
The images I have of them running around my apartment.
Yeah, one of my guys off the floor. I'm not sure which one.
Okay, so you didn't like hire a crew to come do it?
Because what I'm going to assure is the integrity of this case is to its highest.
I didn't know anything. I'd never been back there. I knew nothing.
Michelle's fine. I appreciate you asking about her. She was kind of...
And he taped it, and I pulled the tape, and he taped it. I made a little attempt.
So we were home, and we were cooking dinner, and it had to be about 7 or 7:30, and we get a knock at the back door. Because I didn't accept the plea because I wasn't gonna sign my life away for something I didn't do.
He actually indicated that he believed she was in Mississippi.
Everything from here on out is on the record. You were there when she died.
Amelia's story matches Josh's almost exactly.
Okay, you don't want something to bite you in the behind if you know something.
Oh, no.
Okay?
So she could go to work. And I want
What? She likes you to babysit the kids?
If you tell me to say that there are pink elephants flying around this room, I will tell them.
Dustin Higgs. Dustin John Higgs was an American man who was put down by the United States federal government, having been convicted and sentenced fatally for the January 1996 slaying of 3 women in Maryland. Tamika Black, Tangi Jackson, and Miss Han Chin were all shot and slain near the Patuxent Wildlife Research Center on the Patuxent Research Refuge in Prince George's County, Maryland. Because this is classed as federal land, he was tried by the federal government rather than by the state of Maryland. His case, conviction, and punishment were the subject of multiple controversies. The main contention was that Higgs did not personally slay any of the 3 victims, but waited in a vehicle nearby.
I didn't like it because he had other children and he was still doing the same, dealing with drugs. Very protective of who came in the house, what they were there for.
He was responsible for the household. He was responsible for caring for his mother, head of the house, and of course she became the child. The stress of going to school. Initially, when she was first diagnosed, of course, Dustin took care of his mother more and more. And my brother Richie had to carry her everywhere she went.
I said at 10 years old, he wanted to take part in his mother's right dress that we had picked out to use for her with the right dress and the right. And I was worried at one time because he didn't act like a kid.
Was like isolated. He didn't want to be around anyone. And then when he came to Statsburg to live with us, he still had the same behavior.
So we would go over there and play basketball, shoot the breeze. So it became like he was there to make sure my mother made it to the grocery store.
He was a good boyfriend. He was very attentive. He wanted me to finish school. Little things, running to the store for her. So, I mean, he was a big help to my family.
Unspecific, but he seemed to have a lot of difficulty with writing, putting words on big, dark, sad eyes. He was very shy.
Indicated that he was a violent or aggressive individual. He rejected his father's role, not assaulting or attacking them. This strawberry birthday and it is the quality that one would find of a young adolescent.
The man who shot them, Willis Mark Haynes, was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole plus 45 years. The prosecution argued that although Higgs did not slay anyone, he was the ringleader, ordering and bullying Haynes. Higgs and his defense team maintained his innocence to the end, arguing that he was merely a witness and was set up by Haynes and another witness, Victor Gloria. In 2012, Haynes swore in an affidavit that Higgs did not force or threaten him into slaying any of the victims. At 1:23 a.m. on January 16, 2021, Higgs, 48, was put down by lethal injection of pentobarbital at the United States Penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana. His last words were, "I'd like to say I am an innocent man. I did not order the slaying." He mentioned each of the 3 victims by name, Higgs becoming the 13th and final person put down by the federal government during the presidency of Donald Trump, when such federal punishments returned after a 17-year hiatus.
And it reflects his emotional development, not as a 28-year-old weighs 174 pounds, but rather the opposite.
One of the issues that was never really addressed and clarified at trial, in chronological years, in his early 20s, standpoint of being able to come up with hypothetical alternative ways. What are the long-term consequences of things that you're doing? He wasn't able to do any of that.
You tell us your name?
Daquan.
Your name is Daquan? Okay. Tell me about your daddy. Over there on the phone? Well, you're a good little boy.
What's up, Daquan? How proud of you that I am. Your mother informed me of the many things that you are transpiring with school. How's the debate club coming along?
He wants to be a lawyer. Schoolwork, and he stays on the honor roll because he's like, I'm going to be a lawyer and I'm going to help my father get out of jail.
Like, he's very special to me. He cares deeply for me in the right direction. If he wasn't in my life, I wouldn't know what to do. I wouldn't in trouble, or every time I feel like I'm about to do something wrong, I can always kind of motivation in life.
If Dustin was executed, that would be a big injustice if his father
cared for all of us.
Just get him in the general population, and then we still have Marilyn here with us. From what I understand, Dustin didn't do the killing. Are going to benefit by taking Dustin's life.
A lot of it I do blame myself for, but I definitely don't want him to be sentenced to.
Number 14, Gilbert Ray Postel. Gilbert Ray Postel was an American mass slayer who was sentenced fatally for his involvement in a quadruple slaying in Oklahoma. On May 30th, 2005, Memorial Day, Postel, his brother David Postel, father Brad Postel, and another man, Randall Wade Bias, shot 4 people in a blitz attack at a home in Oklahoma City. The victims were Donnie Swindle, James Alderson, Terry Smith, and Amy Wright. Prior to the attack, Brad Postel was involved in a motorcycle crash and was seriously injured, receiving a brain injury resulting in seizures. The shooting was motivated by Postel's belief that Swindle was responsible for the motorcycle accident, despite there being no evidence for his involvement.
I would like to start by telling you all, it's Gilbert Postel. I was 19 the day these crimes happened, informed you about my childhood and how I was raised growing up. It was a family addiction. My dad, my brother, and me hit by a car and hit in the head with the object. I watched as he almost died, even with all of his flaws. I didn't know more and more drugs to numb the pain. I was heartbroken. I was high for days leading up to this horrible day. There's not a lot that I had been up for almost a week doing meth. Bits and pieces are what I remember.
The victims were marched into the yard outside a trailer home complex where they were told to kneel. During the attack, Postel shot over 30 rounds from an AK-47 rifle, striking all 4 victims. Wright and Alderson tried to flee and Postel shot them from behind. On July 7th, detectives tracked a maroon van similar to one seen in surveillance footage leaving the crime scene to Terre Haute, Indiana, where it was found. Avis Sanders told police he and Daniel Ashcraft drove the van to Indiana. Police recovered trace evidence from the van. David Postal and Brad Postal were arrested on August 16, 2005, and Postal was arrested on August 17, 2005.
Because guilty, and I accept that. My life at that time was filled with chaos and drugs. My stepmom and my daughter Kaylee. The drugs were grandmother has died during my time here. My daughter Kaylee was 2 at the time. She's an 18-year-old and beautiful despite having me as her dad. I've been working at being a better man, a better son, and I try to be a positive influence in this place that I have caused, and not the 19-year-old boy I was.
Sanders, Ashcroft, and Arthur James Wilder were also arrested and charged with accessory. Postal received a jury trial. In 2008, Postal was sentenced to 2 capital sentences, one for the slaying of Wright and one for the slaying of Alderson, and to life without the possibility of parole for Swindle and Smith's demise. Postal was put down on February 17, 2022 by lethal injection. He declined to give any last words. His last meal included 20 chicken nuggets, 3 large fries, 1 crispy chicken sandwich, 1 large cola, and 1 caramel frap.
Richard Smotherman?
So, I want to have my discussion with them. This is the one, surprisingly to myself, that has been the most difficult. I thought, oh my gosh, the crime is horrible. But it has also filled, before I walked in here today, I had no idea what I would vote. Handled, that it was robustly litigated, what their mindset was. They were out a long time, mitigating factors that balance. And you have 4 victims. Not 1, not 2, not 3. Defense counsel, what is different now? A little bit differently to Mr. Postal. And I got, but I do not wear my decision, its responsibility of whether, I do not believe he does not know what happened that day.
Adam Luck?
Yes.
Larry Morris?
No.
Number 13. Melissa Elizabeth Lucio. Melissa Elizabeth Lucio is the first woman of Hispanic descent to be sentenced fatally in the United States of Texas. She was convicted of capital slaying after the demise of her 2-year-old daughter Maria. Maria Alvarez was born to Melissa Lucio and Robert Alvarez in September of 2004. Maria was Lucio's 12th child. Child Protective Services had previously investigated Lucio for allegations of child neglect, and they reported that Lucio's youngest children were often left in the care of their teenage siblings. Lucio was addicted to cocaine and tested positive shortly after Maria was born. This prompted authorities to place her children in foster care. 3 older children went to live in Houston with their father, and Lucio regained custody of the others in late 2006. On February 17, 2007, paramedics were called to the Lucio residence because 2-year-old Maria was unresponsive and not breathing. According to the Cameron County District Attorney's Office, Maria was found at the home with signs of harm on her body, including marks on her back, missing patches of hair, and a fracture in her arm. According to Lucio, Maria had sustained the injuries when she fell down a flight of stairs 2 days earlier. It was later determined that Maria's arm had been broken 2 to 7 weeks before her demise, and an autopsy showed a head injury and bruising of the kidneys, lungs, and spinal cord. The child was pronounced deceased at a local hospital. During a 7-hour interrogation during which Lucio was given no water, food, or a lawyer, she admitted to having spanked Maria but denied ever having harmed her, which she repeated more than 100 times, eventually saying, "I guess I did it, I'm responsible." This was used as a confession. A pathologist, Dr. Norma J. Farley, testified that the child's autopsy indicated that she did not perish from falling downstairs, and instead her injuries were consistent with demise from blunt force trauma. Additionally, court documents state that the emergency room physician said he had not seen a case of child harm worse than Maria's. Lucio's defense argued that Maria's injuries were falling from down the stairs and that Lucio's psychological functioning contributed to her conflicting reports given to authorities. Despite the defense's arguments, Lucio was found guilty of capital slaying and later sentenced to the capital punishment in 2008. Lucio's punishment was set for April 27, 2022, but an appeals court granted her a stay on April 25, 2022. Number 12. John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy, known to many as a friendly man who enjoyed entertaining children, often donning the persona of Pogo the Clown at neighborhood parties, underwent a dramatic shift in public perception in 1978, earning the chilling moniker of the Slayer Clown. In 1964, an early indication of Gacy's dark nature emerged when he was convicted of sodomizing 2 young boys. Following his arrest, Gacy spent 18 months in prison. Upon his release, divorced and seeking a fresh start, he relocated to Chicago. In Chicago, Gacy established a thriving construction business, actively participated in church, remarried, and even took on the role of the Democratic precinct captain in his community. He hosted extravagant block parties, cultivating a strong reputation among friends, neighbors, and law enforcement. However, in July 1975, a teenage employee of Gacy's went missing.
If they want to be convinced or brainwashed into what they believe, then fine, then go ahead and kill me. We picked up like these altar boys along the street, and under sodium amytal, the maximum amount that I could have, looked after my children even now.
What kind of values do you remember imparting to them?
Prompting his parents to implore Chicago police officers to investigate Gacy. Unfortunately, their pleas were ignored, and this would become a recurring pattern as concerned parents repeatedly raised suspicions about Gacy as a potential suspect, only to have their concerns disregarded. In 1976, following his second divorce, Gacy experienced a newfound sense of personal freedom. Little did anyone know he had begun a spree of exploiting and slaying young men. Over a span of just a few years, he claimed the lives of 33 victims, with 29 bodies discovered beneath his house, 26 in the crawl space and 3 in other areas below. In 1977, a young man approached the Chicago police seeking assistance, alleging that John Wayne Gacy had kidnapped and exploited him. While a report was filed, the officers failed to pursue the matter. The following year, Gacy slayed a 15-year-old boy who had visited his home inquiring about job opportunities. This time, the Des Plaines police became involved and conducted a search of Gacy's residence. They uncovered a class ring, clothing size for significantly smaller individuals, and other suspicious items. Further investigation revealed that the ring belonged to a missing teenager, and a witness came forward claiming that Gacy had confessed to slaying up to 30 people. Gacy was arrested and attempted an insanity plea in hopes of evading a guilty verdict. However, the ruse proved unsuccessful and he was convicted. On May 10, 1994, John Wayne Gacy met his demise through lethal injection. Number 11. Tommy Zeigler. On July 2, 1976, 30-year-old William Thomas Zeigler Jr. was convicted of the quadruple murder of his wife, Eunice Zeigler, and her parents, Perry and Virginia Edwards, as well as a customer named Charlie Mays. On December 24, 1975, at Zeigler's furniture store in Winter Garden, Florida, somebody fired approximately 30 bullets. Eunice Zeigler and Virginia Edwards were shot fatally, Perry Edwards and Charlie Mays were beaten with a metal crank, and police later found the crank and 5 guns at the scene. Tommy Zeigler was also shot and wounded in the abdomen. Prosecutors later theorized he shot himself in an attempt to make it look like Mays and 2 other men committed the slaying while robbing the furniture store. William and Thomas eventually testified against Zeigler. A few days after the shootings, while he was in the hospital, Zeigler was arrested and charged with the slaying. According to the prosecution, Zeigler's motive for the slaying was to collect the money from 2 life insurance policies, which were taken out on his wife months before the slaying. These policies were worth a total of $500,000. Zeigler has always said that he was a victim of a bad robbery attempt. He has also maintained that Charlie Mays was involved in this robbery. As recently as 2015, Zeigler has also said that his brother-in-law, Perry Edwards Jr., was the person who planned the slayings. Due to publicity, Zeigler's trial was moved to Jacksonville, Florida. A jury found him guilty. He was given the capital penalty for the slaying of his wife and Mays. He was also sentenced to life imprisonment for the slaying of his wife's parents. Number 10. Carol Edward Eddie Cole. Carol Edward Cole, an American serial slayer, was put down in 1985. He was born in Sioux City, Iowa, and had a troubled upbringing. While his father was away serving in World War II, Cole was subjected to witnessing his mother engaging in questionable activities with other men, and she would often resort to physical violence to intimidate him from speaking about it to his father. Even after his father returned home, Cole endured frequent beatings and abuse from his mother for minor offenses, instilling in him a deep-seated hatred towards women. Additionally, he faced bullying at school due to his girl's name, which led him to adopt his middle name, Eddie, as his preferred identity. At the age of 10, Cole drowned a same-age friend in a lake. The incident was initially considered an accident until Cole confessed to it many years later. As he grew older, Cole became a transient, working menial jobs, indulging in heavy drinking, and frequently finding himself in prison for offenses such as burglary, vagrancy, arson, and car theft. Eventually, Cole began acting upon his violent fantasies. He would pick up women in bars, with some escaping unharmed, while others he perceived as loose would fall victim to his horrible intentions, especially those who were married, as they reminded him of his mother. His first adult victim was Essie Buck, whom he met at a San Diego tavern on May 7, 1971. He strangled her in his car and drove around with her lifeless body in the trunk before disposing of it. Just a fortnight later, he took the life of an unidentified woman, burying her in a wooded area. In July 1973, Cole married Diana Paschal, a barmaid who also battled alcoholism. Their tumultuous relationship was marred by frequent arguments and fights, leading Cole to spend extended periods away from home. During these absences, he continued his slaying spree, including an instance where he allegedly engaged in cannibalism to some extent. By 1980, Cole had remarried and settled in Las Vegas. Towards the end of that year, he claimed 3 more victims. He was arrested under suspicion for the slaying of his final victim, prompting him to confess to at least 14 slayings committed over a span of 9 years. However, due to his habitual intoxication during his crimes, he admitted that there might have been more victims he just couldn't recall precisely. Cole was put down in Nevada on December 6, 1985. Number 9. Taylor Parker. Taylor Renee Parker, a 29-year-old woman from Texas, was found guilty of ruthlessly slaying 21-year-old Reagan Michelle Simmons Hancock in October of 2020. A Texas jury convicted Parker of capital slaying 2 years after she bludgeoned Reagan Michelle Simmons Hancock, who was pregnant. She also abducted her daughter, who was cut out of her womb and later perished. The jury of 6 men and 6 women deliberated for an hour before they convicted Parker of the heinous crime of slaying a 7.5-month pregnant woman at her home to claim her unborn baby as her own. During the 3-week trial, prosecutors outlined the horrific details of the slaying, where Parker reportedly knifed the pregnant woman over 100 times with a scalpel before removing the unborn baby out of the victim's womb. The victim's 3-year-old daughter was reportedly home when Parker violently took down her mother. In the months leading up to the slaying, Taylor Renee Parker faked being pregnant so that she could hang on to her boyfriend. During the trial, prosecutors alleged that Parker went to extreme lengths to deceive her boyfriend. While calling Parker a consummate actress, prosecutors said that she faked ultrasounds, uploaded multiple posts relating to her pregnancy on social media, and also had a gender reveal party. Prosecutors argued that the slaying was premeditated, as investigations revealed that Parker had done extensive research on premature babies before slaying the pregnant victim. After abducting the baby, Parker fled the scene but was stopped by a Texas state trooper for speeding. Parker reportedly told the officer that she was driving to a hospital after she had the baby on the side of the road. Parker and the baby were both rushed to McCurtain Memorial Hospital in Oklahoma, where hospital staff reportedly grew suspicious after she refused to be treated by the doctors. The baby later perished at the hospital. In October of 2020, Parker was arrested by the Oklahoma police. She pleaded not guilty to first-degree slaying and kidnapping charges. After a tedious trial, a jury in Bowie County, Texas, sentenced Parker to capital punishment on November 9, 2022.
A heavy burden feels lifted. I feel like now we can start trying to heal. I wanted to speak for our family and, let her know what we all felt. It's just how
I went through the evidence and the law and felt that they had plenty of information to make that decision.
Lengthy case, factually and emotionally, for everybody involved. So obviously we're disappointed with the outcome, and see where it goes from there.
Number 8. Emilia Carr. Emilia Carr's involvement in the kidnapping and slaying of Heather Strong in Marion County, Florida, led to a harrowing tale of crime, trials, and ultimately a capital sentence. In February 2009, Heather Strong was tragically taken, and it was later revealed that Carr was the perpetrator of this heinous act. The judicial process that followed shed light on the disturbing details of the crime and the fates of those involved. Born as Emilia Yera in Sioux City, Iowa, Carr faced a troubled upbringing, marked by allegations of abuse against her father, which she later withdrew. Her father's subsequent conviction for attempting to solicit the slaying of his family further added to the tumultuous dynamics within her family. Carr had multiple marriages, filed restraining orders, and faced legal troubles, including probation for her involvement in grand theft. Carr's life intersected with Heather Strong when she became engaged to Joshua Damian Fulgham, who eventually married Strong. Despite this, Carr maintained contact with the couple and even babysat Strong's children. Tensions arose between Strong and Fulgham, leading to custody disputes over their 2 children. Tragedy struck in February of 2009 when Heather Strong went missing. Her remains were discovered in March, buried in a shallow grave near McIntosh, Florida. Carr's involvement came to light when investigators noticed the frequency of her statements to authorities and recorded undercover audio of her discussing the crime with Fulgham's sister. The chilling details of Strong's slaying emerged during Carr's trial. Carr, 7 months pregnant at the time, deceived Strong into entering a storage trailer where she suffocated her with a plastic bag. Bound by duct tape to a computer chair, Strong met her tragic end through asphyxiation. Carr gave birth to her 4th child while in custody, and all her children were placed in foster care. During Carr's trial, the jury found her guilty of first-degree slaying and kidnapping. The penalty phase brought forth testimonies about Carr's traumatic childhood marked by physical exploitation. Nevertheless, the jury voted 7-5 in favor of the capital penalty, and Carr was formally sentenced to the capital punishment by lethal injection in February of 2011. Carr was placed on the row at the Lowell Correctional Institution Annex, joining 3 other women awaiting their fate. Number 7. Ricardo Richard Leyva Munoz Ramirez. Richard Ramirez, in full Ricardo Leyva Munoz Ramirez, by name Night Stalker, an American serial slayer and burglar who slayed at least 13 people in California between 1984 and 1985. He was convicted and sentenced to the capital punishment but perished while in prison. Ramirez grew up in El Paso, Texas, the youngest of 5 children born to Mexican immigrants. According to reports, when he was 12 years old, a cousin who was a Vietnam War veteran showed him pictures of Vietnamese women he had allegedly exploited, tortured, and slain. The following year, Ramirez was a witness to his cousin's fatal shooting of his wife. Around this time, Ramirez began breaking into homes. After dropping out of high school, he moved to Los Angeles. He continued to commit crimes and was briefly imprisoned for stealing a car. In June 1984, Ramirez committed his first known slaying and knifing a 79-year-old widow. He then apparently waited some 8 months before resuming his slayings. Most of the incidents occurred in the Los Angeles area and took place during home invasions. Ramirez's victims, some of whom survived, were often attacked and beaten, and satanic symbols were found at many of the crime scenes. The Night Stalker, as the slayer became known, created a panic that saw a surge in gun sales. Eventually, a fingerprint was discovered that led to Ramirez's identification. On August 30th, 1985, 6 days after his last known slaying, Ramirez's name and photograph were released to the public, and the following day, a man in East Los Angeles saw him and notified police. A chase ensued, and as Ramirez tried to steal a car, he was surrounded by a crowd and beaten until police arrived. A self-described Satanist, Ramirez made various references to Satan during his legal proceedings. He notably drew a pentagram on his palm. His trial began in early 1989, and in September he was convicted of 13 slayings and a variety of other crimes. Nearly 2 months later, he was sentenced to the capital punishment. While on the row at San Quentin State Prison, Ramirez was diagnosed with cancer. He died in 2013. Number 6. Darlie Lynn Peck Routier. Darlie Lynn Routier, a woman from Rolette, Texas, has been at the center of a notorious case that involves the slaying of her young son Damon. Convicted for the crime, she currently awaits punishment by lethal injection on the row. The tragic incident occurred on June 6, 1996, when Roudier's two sons, Damon and Devon, were knifed in their family home. While Roudier was accused of slaying both children, she was only prosecuted for the slaying of Damon. The prosecution's case argued that Darlie Roudier committed the slaying due to the family's financial struggles. While her husband Darren, a small business owner, had a relatively high income, Roudier was described as materialistic and living beyond their means. The family resided in a two-story home, drove a mid-sized SUV, and owned a used Jaguar automobile and a used boat. Prosecutors claim that Roudier, burdened by debt and declining credit ratings, feared losing her middle-class lifestyle. Darlie Roudier maintained her innocence and testified that an intruder was responsible for her children's demise. However, inconsistencies between her account and the crime scene evidence raised doubts. During the 911 call, Roudier mentioned finding a knife on the floor but had already touched it before the operator advised against doing so. Blood spatter analysis also indicated that she had raised the knife over her head while knifing the boys. Suspiciously, Roudier's bloody footprints were discovered beneath a vacuum cleaner and broken glass, suggesting a staged scene. Controversy surrounded Roudier's behavior following the tragedy. Just 8 days after the slaying, news reports circulated showing Roudier and other family members celebrating Devon's posthumous 7th birthday at the children's gravesite, with Roudier spraying silly string on the graves. The seemingly light-hearted display raised eyebrows and was widely scrutinized. Roudier was subsequently charged with capital slaying, and after a lengthy legal process, she was convicted for the slaying of Damon. The jury sentenced her to be put down by lethal injection. Despite ongoing claims of her innocence and support from advocates who believe in her wrongful conviction, Roudier remains on the row awaiting her fate. Number 5. Joseph Mitchell Yogi Parsons. Joseph Mitchell Yogi Parsons was an American who was put down for the August 1987 slaying of Richard Lynn Ernest. Parsons hitched a ride with Ernest in California and knifed him fatally at a remote rest area in Utah. After assuming Ernest's identity, Parsons continued to insist that he was Ernest when he was later arrested. Parsons, who called himself the Rainbow Warrior, pleaded guilty to the slaying. During his sentencing hearing, Parsons said that he took down Ernest to fend off in advance, but was unable to present any evidence to support this claim in his defense. The jury sentenced him to his demise, and in 1999, Parsons stated that it's time to move on and dropped his appeals, allowing his punishment to proceed. Discussion was later raised whether Rainbow Warrior was a reference to his orientation or Parsons' favorite auto racing team. Parsons chose to perish by lethal injection, and he shunned attention, describing himself as Utah's forgotten inmate. His 1999 punishment at Utah State Prison was the first to be carried out in a new chamber designed for both lethal injections and firing squads. Number 4. Gerald Lee Mitchell. Gerald Mitchell, aged 33, met his fate on October 22nd in Huntsville, Texas, as he was put down by lethal injection. His conviction stemmed from a robbery and slaying that occurred during a drug transaction. In June 1985, Charles Marino, 20, and his brother-in-law, Kenneth Fleming, 15, ventured to a Houston park to purchase marijuana. It was there that they encountered Mitchell, then 17, who offered to sell them the drugs. Mitchell and an unidentified accomplice got into Marino's car, only for the situation to take a sinister turn. Mitchell brandished a sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun, coercing the men to drive to a vacant house. After seizing $25 and Marino's car keys, the accomplice instructed Mitchell to leave the victims at the scene. Mitchell then forced Marino and Fleming to sit on the floor before callously shooting Marino at close range in the chest. Fleming managed to curl into a ball, but Mitchell proceeded to shoot him as well. Marino tragically lost his life while Fleming miraculously survived. Mitchell's arrest followed 7 days later in Corpus Christi, where he was apprehended while driving Marino's stolen vehicle. During police interrogation, he provided a written confession in which he admitted to shooting Marino and Fleming, albeit claiming it was an accident. In April 1986, Mitchell faced trial and was ultimately convicted of the capital slaying of Charles Marino, receiving the capital penalty as his sentence. His subsequent appeals in both state and federal courts were unsuccessful. Additionally, Mitchell was convicted of attempted capital slaying in relation to the shooting of Kenneth Fleming, resulting in a 60-year prison sentence. He also received another 60-year sentence for the slaying of Hector Manguia. Number 3. Carla Faye Tucker. Carla Faye Tucker became a household name in the 1990s, resonating across the United States. Born on November 18, 1959 in Houston, Texas, Tucker's life took a dramatic turn on June 13, 1983. Together with her then-boyfriend Daniel Garrett, Tucker committed a shocking and brutal slaying that reverberated throughout the nation. Armed with a pickaxe and a hammer, they invaded the home of Jerry Lynn Dean and his companion Deborah Thornton. The vicious attack left both victims brutally battered, with Tucker delivering the final blow that claimed Thornton's life. The sheer brutality of the crime left the community in shock as people sought answers and demanded justice. In 1984, Tucker and Garrett were apprehended and charged with capital murder. The subsequent trial garnered extensive media coverage due to Tucker's gender, the heinousness of the crime, and her eventual conversion to religion while incarcerated. Led by defense attorneys George Mack Seacrest and Ron Mock, Tucker's legal team aimed to humanize her, presenting her as a victim of harm and drug addiction in hopes of swaying the jury for leniency. Throughout the trial, Tucker's troubled life and troubled past were laid bare in the courtroom. The prosecution built a compelling case, meticulously outlining the horrific details of the crime and highlighting Tucker's active involvement. Despite Tucker's claims of coercion and harm, the jury ultimately found her guilty of capital slaying, dismissing the defense's arguments. This verdict would shape the trajectory of her life and ignite intense national debate. During the penalty phase of the trial, Tucker's defense team passionately advocated for clemency, underscoring her remorse, personal transformation behind bars, and her newfound faith in Christianity. Despite widespread appeals for mercy, including pleas from influential figures and religious leaders, Tucker's punishment date drew near. On February 3, 1998, at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, Texas, Carla Faye Tucker was put down.
I don't think so, and hopefully that will change.
Should there be?
There should be. But I have to surrender that to the Lord. I love you, Dana.
Number 2. Dobie Gillis Williams. Gerald Mitchell, an American convicted slayer, gained notoriety for his involvement in the tragic slaying of Sonia Nippers. The crime and subsequent trial led to Mitchell's demise by lethal injection on January 8, 1999, at the Louisiana State Penitentiary. In the early morning hours of July 4, 1984, Mitchell entered the home of Charles and Sonia Nippers. Using 2 milk crates to reach the bathroom window, he cut the screen and gained entry. When Sonia Nippers went to the bathroom later, Mitchell locked the door and brutally knifed her with a knife. Charles Nippers attempted to break down the bathroom door but was unable to stop the attack. After the attack, Mitchell fled through the same window he entered, leaving Sonia bleeding and gravely injured. Sonia Nippers tragically succumbed to her injuries, bleeding fatally shortly after the attack. At the time of the slaying, Mitchell was on a 5-day furlough from Camp Bourgoard, where he had been serving time for attempted simple burglary. He was staying at his grandfather's house, which was located near the Nippers' residence. Mitchell's criminal record drew the attention of investigating detectives who brought him in for questioning. During the interrogation, Mitchell confessed to the slaying, describing how he had knifed Sonia and then fled the scene. Detectives found a knife in the Nippers' yard and retrieved Mitchell's shirt from where he claimed to have hidden it. Forensic analysis further linked Mitchell to the crime. The blood found on the bathroom window curtain matched Mitchell's rare blood type, distinct among African Americans. Hair collected from the scene also exhibited characteristics consistent with Mitchell's hair. Autopsy findings confirmed that the stab wounds on the victim's body were consistent with the knife found in the Nippers' yard. Following a 4-day trial in the 35th Judicial District Court in Grant Parish, Mitchell was found guilty of first-degree slaying as charged. The jury unanimously recommended the capital penalty during the sentencing phase, which the judge imposed. Mitchell's punishment by lethal injection occurred on January 8, 1999. Prior to his demise, Mitchell indulged in 12 candy bars and some ice cream for his last meal. Number 1. Timothy James McVeigh. Timothy James McVeigh was an American domestic terrorist who perpetrated the Oklahoma City bombing attack on April 19, 1995. This act of violence remains one of the deadliest acts of domestic terrorism in U.S. history. McVeigh's crime resulted in the demise of 168 people, including 19 children, and injured over 500 others. Born on April 23, 1968 in Lockport, New York, McVeigh served in the U.S. Army from 1988 to 1991. During his time in the military, he developed extremist views and became influenced by various anti-government ideologies. McVeigh harbored a deep resentment towards the federal government, which he believed had overstepped its boundaries and violated the rights of American citizens. On the morning of April 19, 1995, McVeigh parked a rented Ryder truck packed with a deadly mixture of ammonium nitrite fertilizer, diesel fuel, and other chemicals in front of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. At precisely 9:02 a.m., the explosives detonated, causing immense destruction and loss of life. In the aftermath of the incident, McVeigh was quickly identified as the prime suspect. He was apprehended just 90 minutes after the attack for driving without a license plate, and a search of his vehicle revealed weapons and materials associated with the construction of the explosive. McVeigh was subsequently charged with multiple federal offenses, including conspiracy to use a weapon of mass destruction, and was indicted on 11 federal counts. During his trial, which took place in Denver, Colorado, McVeigh maintained his belief that the government's actions at Ruby Ridge and the Waco siege were justification for his violent act. However, the jury found him guilty on all counts. In 1997, McVeigh was sentenced to perish by lethal injection. His punishment was carried out on June 11, 2001 at the Federal Correctional Complex in Terre Haute, Indiana.
The discovery, unraveling a dark secret. In September 2019, a chilling revelation emerged from the depths of a quiet community in Summerfield, Florida. Michael Wayne Jones, a 41-year-old man, had been arrested in Brantley County, Georgia, following a single vehicle crash. However, what transpired in the aftermath of his arrest would unveil a horrific secret, sending shock waves through the nation and forever staining the memory of the Jones family. It all began when Jones, in a moment of chilling candor, informed law enforcement officials that his wife's lifeless body was inside a vehicle he had been driving. This revelation marked the first ominous sign that something deeply disturbing had occurred within the confines of the Jones household. Georgia and Marion County Sheriff's Office detectives were alerted to this gruesome revelation and immediately sprang into action. They accompanied Jones to the locations where he had left the bodies of his victims, not yet comprehending the horrifying extent of the tragedy that had unfolded.
News 4 Jax reporter Scott Johnson has been going through the evidence and is joining us from the newsroom with what he's discovered.
Tom, one thing we know is that investigators have a lot of evidence against him.
The body was found inside that van, and then they discovered the children's bodies in nearby Charlton County.
Because they are redacted due to the fact that they could be self-incriminating, including things he said to them. Some we can hear, others we can't.
As the investigation progressed, the horrifying truth began to emerge. Michael Wayne Jones, in a series of shocking confessions, admitted to the slaying of his wife Casey in a manner that defied comprehension. He had used a metal baseball bat, repeatedly striking her with a brutality that left investigators and the community aghast. However, the horrors didn't stop there. Jones, seemingly devoid of remorse, continued to confess to a series of slayings that were equally disturbing. He admitted slaying his 4 young children, Cameron, age 9, Preston, just 4 years old, Mark Kelly, a 2-year-old toddler, and the youngest, 11-month-old Ayana.
To the charges against you, second-degree murder under Florida Statute 782.04, paren 2. At this time, you are charged with 1 count by warrant for this is a first-degree felony, which carries a probable life sentence.
The details surrounding their demises were as horrifying as they were heart-wrenching. The 2 youngest victims were Jones's daughters, innocent and full of potential. The older 2 were Casey's sons from a previous relationship, adding layers of complexity and tragedy to an already nightmarish scenario. Detectives believe that Jones had either drowned or strangled the children at different times on separate days, each act a chilling testament to the depths of darkness that had consumed him. The timeline of these heinous acts was equally distressing. Investigators pieced together a grim puzzle, revealing that these horrifying events had taken place between July 10 and the end of August 2019. The implications were staggering, and the community was left reeling from the revelation that such unimaginable horrors had occurred within their midst. The investigation, initially triggered by Jones's shocking confession, would go on to uncover the full extent of the tragedy that had unfolded within the Jones family. As details emerged, the community grappled with a profound shock and disbelief that such a horrifying secret could be hidden behind the closed doors of an apparently ordinary household. The discovery of these gruesome events sent shockwaves not only through the community of Summerfield, but also throughout the nation. It served as a grim reminder that even within seemingly ordinary families, darkness and unspeakable horrors can lurk beneath the surface. The Jones family's horrifying secret, once uncovered, would leave an indelible mark on the collective conscience of a community left grappling with unimaginable loss and the haunting question of how such a tragedy could have occurred. The revelation of this dark secret was the first chapter in a harrowing journey of justice, healing, and the search for answers. It was a moment that would forever haunt those who had come into contact with the case, a chilling reminder of the need for vigilance in recognizing the signs of domestic violence and the urgency of providing support and intervention before it is too late. The Jones household before the tragedy. In the quiet community of Summerfield, Florida, the Jones family appeared from the outside to be an ordinary family striving to lead a peaceful life. Michael Wayne Jones, a 41-year-old man, his wife Casey, and their 4 children, Cameron, Preston, Merkelly, and Ayana, were seemingly living a typical suburban existence. However, beneath the veneer of normalcy, a sinister and tragic story was unfolding. Michael Wayne Jones, known to friends and neighbors as a reserved and unassuming man, had a past that hinted at the darkness that would eventually consume him. Born into a troubled family, Jones had experienced a tumultuous childhood marked by instability and adversity. His upbringing would later be cited as a possible factor contributing to the horrifying events that would transpire. Casey, Jones's wife and the mother of 4 children, was described by those who know her as a caring and devoted mother. She too had her own history of challenges, but she seemed committed to providing a stable and loving home for her family. Friends and family members remember her as a dedicated parent who always put her children's well-being first. The 4 children, Cameron, Preston, Merkelly, and Ayana, embody the innocence and promise of youth. Cameron, the eldest at just 9 years old, was known for his playful spirit and love for adventure. Preston, aged 4, was a typical energetic and curious toddler. Merkelly, the 2-year-old sister, and Ayana, the youngest and only 11 months, were still in the early stages of their development, full of potential and wonder. To those in their community, the Jones family was like any other, a tight-knit unit facing the challenges of life together. They lived in a modest suburban home, played in the neighborhood, and participated in community events. On the surface, they were unremarkable, blending seamlessly into the fabric of their surroundings. However, the facade of normality concealed a darker reality. Behind closed doors, the family struggled with internal conflicts which would ultimately culminate in a tragedy of unimaginable proportions. Michael Wayne Jones, plagued by personal demons and mental health issues, was facing a breaking point. His past, riddled with instability, had left scars that would later manifest in shocking ways. As the months passed, the strain within the family seemed to intensify. The exact nature of the conflicts and tensions that festered within the household remained concealed from the prying eyes of neighbors and friends. The community had no inkling of the horrors that would soon be exposed. The events leading up to the tragedy that unfolded in November 2019 remained largely shrouded in secrecy. It was a family that appeared to be, by all appearances, trying to keep their struggles hidden from the world. Little did anyone know that the Jones family was teetering on the precipice of a horrifying abyss. In September of that year, the facade crumbled and the truth was revealed in the most shocking and devastating manner. The events that transpired during that fateful month would forever alter the lives of those involved and send shock waves through the community of Summerfield and beyond. In the aftermath of the shocking revelations, the community and the nation would grapple with the profound loss of 5 innocent lives and search for answers as to how such a tragedy could have occurred within the confines of a seemingly ordinary household. The story of the Jones family serves as a stark reminder of the importance of recognizing the signs of domestic violence and mental health struggles and the need for support and intervention before it is too late.
He and his wife, Casey Jones, were getting a divorce and that he wanted to stay with her here.
My understanding of their relationship at that point was that it was a bit contentious. Yeah, I mean, why them and not us?
Michael Jones' ex-wife, Sarah, tells me she is devastated.
The images I have of them running around my apartment.
That he could have killed his family or left their dead bodies in his van right outside her apartment.
And he seemed to think that she was doing something devious.
At her apartment in Jacksonville so he could spend time with their 3 children. She says she didn't see any signs.
He was playing with his kids every day. He was taking them to the pool.
Confession and shock. In November, the community of Summerfield, Florida was left in a state of shock and disbelief when Michael Wayne Jones, a 41-year-old man, made a horrifying confession. Jones pleaded guilty to 4 counts of first-degree slaying and 1 count of second-degree slaying, admitting to the violent 2019 slayings of his wife Casey and her 4 children, aged 1 to 10. This chilling admission marked the beginning of a deeply disturbing chapter in the community's history. The circumstances surrounding Jones's confession were haunting.
And not only do detectives have his confession, they also have a mountain of evidence.
People had different reactions to the jury's decision. Some say he deserved the death penalty,
I think it should be up to the family members of the deceased.
while others say he should spend life in prison.
Decide if they want to see this man put to death or if they want to know that he's rotting away.
After murdering his wife following a domestic dispute where Casey Jones accused him of cheating.
The case bypassed the traditional trial process as part of a plea deal, plunging directly into the penalty phase. This phase tasked jurors with grave responsibility of deciding whether Michael Wayne Jones would face life in prison or the demise penalty. It was unprecedented admission of guilt that sent shock waves through the legal system. The Marion County jury, composed of 10 men and 5 women, was exposed to the gruesome details of the crime during the trial. Assistant State Attorney Amy Byrne painted a horrifying picture describing how Jones had brutally slayed his wife, Casey Jones, aged 32, and subsequently savagely slayed her 4 children. 2 of these children were fathered by another man, adding a layer of complexity and tragedy to the already horrifying narrative. Jones's confession provided a shocking timeline of events. He disclosed that he had first slayed Casey Jones on July 10, 2019, following an alleged accusation of infidelity. In a gruesome account detailed in a 142-page police report, Jones claimed that his wife had nudged him with a metal baseball bat before he brutally beat her to demise. This chilling act occurred while the children slept unaware in their family home. After committing this heinous act, Jones attempted to conceal the evidence by placing Casey's lifeless body in a tote bag and cleaning up the blood. The gruesome aftermath of his actions was evident as Casey's blood was found on the floors and ceiling of their family residence. Following Casey's slaying, the 2 stepsons, Cameron and Preston, spent 2 weeks with their biological father, while the 2 younger daughters, Markelly Jones, aged 2, and Ayanna Jones, just 11 months old, were sent to stay with Casey's mother. Jones, however, did not stop at the slaying of his wife. He provided a deeply disturbing account to the police regarding the slayings of the stepsons when they returned between August 10 and August 22 of the same year. In a chilling revelation, he described manually strangling Cameron and using a knee to compress his chest to ensure he could not breathe. Cameron's lifeless body was placed in a suitcase. The next night, he turned his attention to Preston, using a zip tie to strangle the 4-year-old, as his hands were hurting from strangling Cameron. Additionally, Jones admitted to placing a rag in a bathroom drain and drowning Preston under running water. The details were gruesome and horrifying. Jones confessed to using kitty litter to absorb bodily fluids while storing the boys' bodies in the family home for several weeks. The horrors escalated further when he drowned each of the 2 young daughters in the bathtub upon their return from their grandmother's care, storing their lifeless bodies in a tote bin. The public reaction to this shocking revelation was one of profound shock and disbelief. The community of Summerfield and the nation at large were left reeling from the horrifying details of the case. Jones's actions were a terrifying manifestation of pure evil, and the community struggled to come to terms with the unimaginable horrors that occurred within their midst. The circumstances surrounding Michael Wayne Jones's confession were a grim reminder of the capacity for darkness that can exist even in seemingly ordinary households. The public's initial reaction was one of horror and sorrow as the nation grappled with the profound shock of such heinous crimes. The victims, remembering the lives lost. The horrifying tragedy surrounding the slayings committed by Michael Wayne Jones in 2019 not only sent shockwaves through the community but also left behind a devastating impact on the lives of the victims, Cameron, Preston, Merkelly, Ayanna, and Casey. Remembering these innocent lives and the impact of their loss is a somber reminder of the profound grief that lingers in the wake of such a heinous crime. Cameron Bowers, age 9. Cameron was a 9-year-old boy full of youthful energy and curiosity. He was known for his vibrant personality and infectious laughter. Cameron enjoyed exploring the outdoors, riding his bike, and playing with his friends. He had a fondness for animals, often expressing a desire to become a veterinarian when he grew up. His tragic loss left a void in the hearts of those who knew him as they remembered his bright smile and boundless enthusiasm. Preston Bowers, age 4. Preston, at the tender age of 4, was a sweet and lively child. He possessed a charming innocence that endeared him to everyone he met. He was fond of toys and games, and he loved spending time with his family. His loss was a heartbreaking reminder of the innocence of childhood cut short and left a profound impact on the community, which mourned the loss of such a young life. Merkelly Jones, age 2. Merkelly, just 2 years old, was a toddler full of curiosity and wonder. Her budding personality showed signs of a spirited and adventurous spirit. She enjoyed exploring her surroundings, and her laughter brought joy to those around her. Her untimely passing left a deep sense of sorrow as the community grieved the loss of a young life with so much potential. Ayanna Jones, age 11 months. Ayanna, the youngest of the victims at just 11 months, was a precious baby who had yet to fully discover the world around her. Her innocence and vulnerability touched the hearts of those who knew her. Ayanna's life was tragically cut short before she had the chance to take her first step or utter her first words. Her loss was a painful reminder of the innocence of infancy and the tragedy of a life barely begun. Casey Jones, 32 years old. Casey, age 32, was not only a victim but also a mother and wife whose life was brutally taken by her husband. She was described as a loving and caring mother, deeply devoted to her children. Casey's loss was not only a personal tragedy for her family, but also a heartbreaking reminder of the devastating impact of domestic violence on individuals and families. Her memory served as a poignant symbol of the need for support and intervention in cases of misuse. The loss of these 5 innocent lives left an indelible mark on the community, which mourned not only the tragic demises, but also the unfulfilled potential and the profound sorrow of their families. Their memories serve as a stark reminder of the importance of recognizing and addressing domestic violence and its devastating consequences. The impact of their loss extended far beyond their immediate circle, touching the hearts of all those who learned of their tragic fate and reinforcing the urgency of preventing such senseless acts of violence.
He was talking about a future with them. There was absolutely nothing that...
Jones says her heart goes out to Casey Jones's family. She said she was a wonderful mother.
I have never been a fan of the death penalty. But to be very honest with you, these are those cases would have piqued in my mind to say, oh my gosh, I think he did something.
Legal proceedings. Following Michael Wayne Jones's chilling confession to the heinous slayings of his wife and her 4 children, the legal process embarked on a challenging journey that would ultimately lead to a jury trial. The steps that followed his confession were marked by the pursuit of justice and the determination to hold him accountable for his horrifying crimes. The legal proceedings commenced with Jones's arrest in Brantley County, Georgia in September 2019 after he was involved in a single vehicle crash. During his arrest, he disturbingly revealed that his wife's body was in the vehicle. This admission set the stage for a thorough investigation into the demise of Casey Jones and her 4 children. Jones's confession during the subsequent police interviews provided critical details about the timeline and nature of the crimes. As the investigation unfolded, the prosecution faced a significant decision regarding the appropriate punishment for Michael Wayne Jones. Given the heinous nature of the crimes and the loss of 5 innocent lives, the prosecution chose to seek the demise penalty. This decision was based on the severity of the offenses and the pursuit of the most severe legal consequences available under the law. The legal process also involved the intricate and crucial task of jury selection. A jury trial is a fundamental component of the American legal system, and selecting impartial jurors was essential to ensure a fair and just trial for Jones. The process of jury selection aimed to identify individuals who could impartially assess the evidence and make an objective determination regarding his guilt, and if applicable, the appropriate punishment. Prospective jurors were carefully vetted to ensure that they had no preconceived biases or conflicts of interest that could compromise the fairness of the trial. The goal was to assemble a jury that could objectively evaluate the evidence presented during the trial and make an impartial decision based on the facts and the law. Throughout this phase, the prosecution and the defense would engage in a meticulous process of questioning potential jurors to identify any potential biases or disqualifications. The final composition of the jury would play a pivotal role in determining Jones's fate, including whether he would face the demise penalty or life in prison. The legal proceedings that followed Jones's confession were characterized by a commitment to upholding the principles of justice and ensuring a fair trial. The decision to seek the demise penalty and the careful selection of jurors underscored the gravity of the case and the solemn responsibility of the legal system to deliver justice for the victims and their grieving families. The trial. The trial of Michael Wayne Jones was an arduous legal process, one that unfolded with the singular goal of bringing justice to the heinous slayings of his wife, Casey, and her 4 young children.
So I'm going to appoint a public defender to represent you. Application for criminal indigent status that you qualify for the public defender's office. I will tell you that your next court date, that will be your arraignment, and your arraignment is the hearing at which you will enter a formal plea. It's scheduled for October the 22nd at 9 o'clock in the morning.
This trial was marked by a profound presentation of evidence, harrowing witness testimonies, and a verdict that reflected the gravity of the crimes committed. Throughout the trial, the prosecution left no stone unturned in its quest to establish the guilt of Michael Wayne Jones. The evidence presented was nothing short of staggering. Forensic analysis, meticulous crime scene investigations, and the stark documentation of extensive blood stains found within the family residence painted a chilling and irrefutable picture of the brutality that had transpired. The physical evidence served as a haunting backdrop to the proceedings, compelling those in the courtroom to confront the gruesome reality of the crimes. However, it was the witness testimonies that breathed life into the trial, offering a deeply personal and often gut-wrenching perspective on the events leading up to the slayings and the horrifying details of the crimes themselves. Family members, friends, and individuals connected to the case stepped forward to share their experiences and interactions with Michael Wayne Jones and Casey, each testimony adding another layer to the complex narrative. These testimonies served as windows into the dynamics of the household, shedding light on a troubling history of misuse within the family. They revealed the fear of manipulation that had festered behind closed doors, hidden from the prying eyes of neighbors and friends. The witnesses painted a portrait of a family marked by turmoil and suffering, a family that would ultimately be shattered by an unfathomable act of violence. Assistant State Attorney Amy Berndt, the prosecutor leading the case, delivered a compelling narrative that held the courtroom in rapt attention. Her vivid descriptions of the acts committed by Michael Wayne Jones were designed to sear into the collective memory of the jury. She emphasized the brutal slaying of Casey, recounting how she had been brutally slayed before her 4 children were savagely slayed. Bernst's powerful and evocative presentation aimed to ensure that the jury comprehended the full extent of the horrors inflicted by Jones. The jury, comprised of individuals tasked with the solemn responsibility of determining the appropriate punishment for Michael Wayne Jones, bore a heavy burden. They meticulously reviewed the evidence, listened intently to the heart-wrenching testimonies, and weighed the gravity of the crimes. After due deliberation, the jury arrived at a unanimous recommendation: the demise penalty for Jones. This unanimous decision spoke volumes about the severity of the crimes and the collective judgment that such a punishment was warranted. It was a resounding statement that the community, through its representatives in the legal system, would not countenance acts of extreme violence, particularly when they led to the loss of innocent lives. The verdict, delivered with a weight of collective conscience, was left a solemn moment that left an indelible impression on all present. It underscored the magnitude of the crimes committed and the understanding that justice demanded the harshest penalty available under the law. In that unanimous recommendation for the demise penalty, the community and the legal system affirmed their commitment to holding individuals accountable for their actions and ensuring justice for the victims and their grieving families. The trial of Michael Wayne Jones was a stark reminder of the horrors that occurred behind closed doors, hidden from view. It was a testament to the unwavering commitment of the legal system to seek justice for the most vulnerable in society and to hold perpetrators accountable for their deeds. The presentation of evidence, the heart-wrenching witness testimonies, and the jury's unanimous verdict collectively reinforced the fundamental principle that society would not tolerate acts of violence that led to the tragic loss of innocent lives.
Here, I've just got to make contact with the attorney's office, and obviously you know that there's going to be more charges forthcoming. Of course. Okay. You're going to be charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. Yeah. Okay. On top of the second-degree murder. Yeah.
Sentencing and consequences. The sentencing phase of Michael Wayne Jones's trial marked a crucial juncture in the pursuit of justice for the heinous slayings of his wife, Casey, and her 4 children. With the evidence presented, testimonies heard, and the jury's unanimous recommendation for the demise penalty, all eyes turned to Judge Anthony Taddy, who held the solemn responsibility of delivering the final ruling. Judge Taddy's decision was rendered during a hearing at the Marion County Judicial Center in Ocala, Florida, on a solemn day that carried the weight of profound sorrow and the quest for justice. The courtroom was a somber setting, filled with the families of the victims, legal professionals, and members of the community who had closely followed the trial proceedings. The sentencing phase unfolded with a sense of gravity that matched the magnitude of the crimes committed by Michael Wayne Jones. Having pleaded guilty to 4 counts of first-degree slaying and 1 count of second-degree slaying, Jones had waived the need for a traditional trial. Instead, the proceedings delved straight into the penalty phase, where the jury's role was to recommend either the demise penalty or life in prison. Throughout the penalty phase, the defense system, led by Executive Assistant Public Defender John Spivey, was relentless in its effort to spare Jones from the demise penalty. They presented a comprehensive case, highlighting Jones's troubled upbringing, mental health issues, and significant psychological problems. Their argument was that these factors had played a critical role in shaping Jones's actions and that life in prison was a more appropriate punishment.
Michael Wayne Jones off of death row.
TV 20's Taylor Simpson tells us who they brought to the witness stand in his defense.
The man who was convicted of murdering his wife and 4 kids returned to the classroom today.
Defense and the state asked questions to a neuropsychologist. Jones faces the death penalty. Throughout the hearing, a few times Michael Wayne Jones balled up his hands and placed them over his eyes after killing his wife and his 4 children. His defense attorneys brought in neuropsychologists.
On the opposing side, Assistant State Attorneys Amy Brent and Rich Buxman vehemently argued in favor of the demise penalty, citing several aggravating factors in the case that in their view made it the appropriate punishment. The prosecution was resolute in seeking the harshest possible penalty for Jones, emphasizing the brutality of the crimes and the profound loss suffered by the victims' families. Judge Taddy was faced with the unenviable task of weighing these arguments, considering the evidence, and ultimately delivering a ruling that would have far-reaching consequences. His decision was eagerly anticipated by those present in the courtroom, as it held the power to bring a sense of closure to the victims' families and to the community at large. When Judge Taddy began to deliver his ruling, the courtroom fell into an eerie silence. The gravity of the moment hung heavy in the air. He acknowledged the horrific nature of the crimes committed by Jones, describing them as unimaginable and indescribable. Judge Taddy recognized the profound loss endured by the victims' families, whose lives had been forever altered by these senseless acts of violence. In his ruling, Judge Taddy imposed the demise penalty for the slayings of the 4 children. It was a momentous decision that sent a clear message about the severity of the crimes. The courtroom was filled with a mixture of emotions, from the somber relief of the victims' families to the shock and disbelief of Jones' supporters. For the slaying of Casey, Judge Taddy imposed a life sentence in prison. The decision recognized the importance of accountability for Jones' actions but stopped short of the ultimate punishment. The contrast in sentencing between slayings of the children and that of Casey underscored the nuanced legal considerations that guided Judge Taddy's decision. Reactions to Judge Taddy's ruling were as varied as the emotions that permeated the courtroom. The father of Cameron and Preston, the 2 stepsons, had lost their lives at the hands of Jones, declined to comment. He had endured the agonizing trial proceedings and the revelations of the brutality inflicted upon his children. Prosecutors, on the other hand, expressed satisfaction with the ruling, stating that they were pleased that the families of the victims had received the justice they deserved. The prosecution's unwavering commitment to seeking the demise penalty had been validated by Judge Taddy's decision. Outside the courtroom, Executive Assistant Public Defender John Spivey shared his perspective with a Star Banner reporter. He acknowledged that the judge's decision had not come as a surprise, as the defense had been anticipating the outcome. In preparation for the possibility of a demise sentence, Spivey and the defense team had already filed documents for an appeal. Spivey further revealed that he and his team had spent weeks preparing Jones for the potential of a demise sentence. He described Jones as having adjusted to his fate. It was a sobering reflection of the profound consequences of the ruling on Jones's life. Spivey also emphasized the challenges faced by Jones, who lacked financial resources and support. In an effort to maintain contact with their client, the defense had purchased an iPad for Jones, recognizing the isolation and separation that awaited him in prison. In the aftermath of Judge Teddy's ruling, the community of Summerfield and the wider public grappled with a mix of emotions. The sentencing marked the conclusion of a painful chapter, but it did not erase the deep scars left by the crimes. The consequences of the ruling would reverberate through the lives of those directly affected by the tragedy and serve as a reminder of the enduring impact of senseless violence. Judge Anthony Taddy's decision to impose the demise penalty for the slayings of the 4 children and a life sentence for Casey's slaying was a reflection of the legal system's commitment to delivering justice. It underscored the principle that those who commit heinous acts of violence will be held accountable for their actions. In the end, the sentencing and its consequences serve as a solemn reminder of the profound and lasting impact of such crimes on individuals, families, and communities. Community impact, healing, and advocacy. The tragic events that unfolded in Summerfield left an indelible mark on the community, sparking a profound response that extended far beyond the courtroom. As the community grappled with the unimaginable loss of Casey and her 4 children, it also found strength in unity and resilience, driving efforts to raise awareness about domestic violence and igniting a broader conversation about family violence on both local and national scales. The impact of the case on the Summerfield community was immediate and profound. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers were deeply affected by the loss of 5 lives within their midst. The shockwaves of the tragedy reverberated through the close-knit community, leaving many struggling to come to terms with the enormity of the crimes. In response to the tragedy, the Summerfield community rallied together, offering support to the grieving families and organizing vigils to remember the victims. These gatherings provided opportunity for community members to share their grief, offer comfort, and stand in solidarity with those who had lost loved ones. The sense of unity that emerged during this difficult time served as a source of strength for a community in mourning. One of the most significant impacts of the case was the increased awareness of domestic violence. The horrifying nature of the crimes committed by Michael Wayne Jones shone a spotlight on the pervasive issue of domestic violence, prompting important conversations about the signs, prevention, and support available to victims. Advocacy organizations, local agencies, and community leaders seized the opportunity to raise awareness about domestic violence and provide resources to those in need. They organized awareness campaigns, distributed informational materials, and hosted workshops to educate the community about the dynamics of domestic violence and the availability avenues for seeking help and support. The tragedy also spurred discussions about the importance of early intervention and support for individuals facing abusive situations. It became evident that domestic violence was not an isolated issue, but one that required a collective effort to address. Local and national conversations began to center around the need for increased funding for domestic violence programs, improved access to counseling services, and better legal protections for victims. The impact of the Summerfield case extended beyond the local community, resonating with people across the nation. The horrifying details of the slayings and the subsequent legal proceedings serve as a stark reminder of the profound consequences of family violence. The case was covered extensively by media outlets, drawing attention to the importance of addressing domestic violence on a broader scale. National advocacy groups and lawmakers took note of the case, using it as a catalyst for legislative action and policy changes aimed at protecting victims of domestic violence. The tragic loss of Casey and her children became a rallying cry for advocates fighting to ensure that no one else would suffer a similar fate. In the years that followed, the Summerfield case continued to serve as a stark reminder of the enduring impact of family violence and the need for ongoing efforts to prevent and address it. The victims were not forgotten, and their legacy lived on in the advocacy work, support services, and policy initiatives that sought to honor their memory by preventing future tragedies. The Summerfield community, scarred by profound loss it had endured, found strength in coming together and advocating for change. Through shared grief, awareness campaigns, and a commitment to supporting victims, the community demonstrated its resilience in the face of tragedy. The impact of this case, both locally and nationally, served as a testament to the enduring power of community, advocacy, and the pursuit of justice in the wake of unspeakable violence.
What to do when the enemy at the gates is being helped from within the castle? This is the nightmare Heather Strong found herself grappling with, for which she paid the ultimate price, while her husband Joshua Damon Fulgham and his paramour Amelia Lily Carr dug her grave, literally, and then put her in it. Did Heather suspect what had been going on, or was she just as surprised as the community she had lived in found out her fate? Let's take a closer look at what happened and find out how it all began. Amelia Carr could easily pass for a girl in her late teens. In fact, she is 30 years old and the youngest woman in the United States on Demise Row. Articulate and attractive, she is becoming something of a cause célèbre for opponents of the death penalty and those who feel American justice is particularly harsh on women. Amelia Carr, in her interviews with the camera, seems personable and approachable. She looks much younger than her now 30 years and is pretty with dark hair and mischievous eyes. Only her teeth show signs of not being looked after, which, coupled with her orange jumpsuit, are the only indicators that she's not a normal girl living a normal life in normal, everyday society. Carr is currently incarcerated in Florida's Lowell Correctional Institution in Ocala, close to the remote rural community of Boardman, where Heather Strong's body was unearthed in March of 2009. She is one of only 5 such women in the Sunshine State's Demise Row, so how did she end up getting the dubious honor of taking the life of Heather Strong? Was it a case of being at the wrong place at the wrong time? Or was it on the cards due to her less than stellar upbringing?
From the very beginning. So he kind of used that as a way to, hey, you know, off into another room where there weren't cameras in their offices and things like that, and talk to me. And so we need you to come up with something so that we can get him. And see, that's what they kept telling me, is that they wanted him.
I think she had been worn down to the point where, if you tell me to say that there are pink elephants flying around this room, I will tell them that.
Because that's what was told to me. I didn't know anything. I had never been back there. I knew nothing.
Because she was involved.
Quite frankly, if you confess, so that's just the only option she's got left.
Profile of a budding slayer. Amelia Lily Carr was born Amelia Yera on August 4th, 1984. She was the second of 3 sisters. A psychologist estimated her IQ to be 125. At the age of 15, she reported maltreatment by her father to her school but withdrew her statement to officials. In February of 2004, Carr's father was convicted of attempting to solicit the slayings of his family. Amelia, her mother, and one of her sisters were all on his target, and he was sentenced to 4 years in prison for it.
Michelle was fine. I appreciate you asking about her. She was kind of fact-finding type interview. In this interview, we had the facts.
That's what we were talking about, the baby, because I went to court today, and they won't even release my kids to any of my family.
I think it's time for we open today. you had a conversation was recorded. Totally.
It later turned out that the apple hadn't fallen very far from the tree and Amelia was following pretty closely in her father's footsteps. Some would say she outshone him in that department with the role she eventually played in Heather's fate. Carr went on to lead a troubled life with misfortune and lack of luck and love dogging her footsteps into adulthood. Hopping from relationship to relationship, she looked for love in all the wrong places, getting married twice with no dice. In fact, her last marriage was a sorry tale of extreme physical maltreatment, which ended with Amelia getting a restraining order against her ex-husband. Not that it stopped her from dabbling her hand in a little bit of illegal activities on the side. She was sentenced to 2 years of probation for her involvement in her ex-husband's grand theft of exotic birds. Carr had 3 children at the time, one of them with her ex-boyfriend, Jamie Akome.
To being there. Tell me what happened. To killing someone.
No, I admitted to it. That's everything. And there.
Everything is on the
from
record.
here on out is on the record. You were there when she died. Is that right? Is what Josh said?
Excuse me.
Now's the time.
Don't give us that respect. Don't nod. Is that right? I'm not talking to you in sign language.
I know.
I'm talking to you person to person.
A lethal love triangle. Citra was a small, sleepy town nestled on the rolling, scenic landscape of Florida. Like every small town, everybody is in each other's business, and gossip has a way of going around faster than a bullet on the community grapevine. It was common knowledge that before Heather Strong married her husband Josh, he was involved in a torrid relationship with Amelia as her live-in boyfriend. Heather had lived a difficult life which had only gotten worse when she became involved with Joshua Fulgham and Amelia Carr. While Amelia was daydreaming of walking down the aisle on the arm of that gentle man, he was busy whispering sweet nothings in the ear of Heather. Heather and Joshua had an on-again, off-again relationship. Heather Strong began dating Joshua Fulgham back when she was only 15 years old. Joshua was 22 at the time. The two had a very tumultuous relationship. They reportedly fought constantly and were often breaking up and getting back together.
With Josh when Heather took her last breath.
Amelia's story matches Josh's almost exactly and puts the act on Josh, saying that he's the one that suffocated her.
How far back do you? And he taped it. And I pulled the tape and he taped it. I made a little attempt once or twice. And I couldn't.
How many times do you think you tried?
But you tried to snap her neck because you wanted it to be.
So that I just stepped back and he took over.
But both of you guys were there. So if Josh sat on her lap or if Amelia sat on her lap, they both could have stopped this.
Over the years, Heather and Joshua had 2 children together. In 2003, they decided to move from Mississippi to Marion County, Florida. The fights continued there, as did the repeated patterns of breaking up and reconciling. In June 2008, 26-year-old Heather seemed to finally put her foot down. During one of the couple's many separations, Heather and her children moved in with her friend Benjamin McCullum. After a few weeks of staying there, Heather and Benjamin became intimate. Joshua was furious about Heather's new relationship, even though he, too, had begun a new relationship with 26-year-old Amelia Carr. Ben McCullum, a mechanic in McIntosh whom Strong had been dating, later relayed to authorities that Fulgham once called his house an automobile shop, threatening to slay both him and Heather and burn his shop. In November of 2008, Carr became engaged to Joshua Fulgham. Over the next 6 months, Joshua continued to harass both Heather and her new boyfriend, Benjamin. He reportedly threatened them both with a firearm on numerous occasions. Heather's friends stated that Heather was very happy in her new relationship with Benjamin and seemed to be in a good place in life. Her friends were quite surprised when Heather ultimately decided to reconcile with Joshua in December of 2008. At that point, Joshua told Amelia that their relationship was over and that she had to move out, despite the fact that she was pregnant with Joshua's child. Joshua and Heather ended up marrying on December 26, 2008. So, what were Carr's feelings about it? Carr's mother said in a deposition that she just couldn't believe it and she was hurt. Here, he proposed to her, bought the ring for her, and in December, He came back and took it and married Heather. The victim's cousin, though, is less charitable. She said the marriage was a ruse, all part of a plot to deceive Heather Strong so Carr and Fulgham could slay her. While we might be confused about who was playing which role in this love triangle, one thing is for sure, which is that Joshua's about-face was the ultimate betrayal, and Amelia Carr was too much of a manipulator to take it lying down. What would have sent a lesser woman into histrionics merely ignited a flame in Carr to get back what she had lost with time. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, and the only way Amelia was going to let bygones be bygones was by getting revenge in kind. To do that, she became the proverbial snake in the grass. According to her family, Amelia maintained contact with the couple and babysat Strong's 2 children. She became the serpent in hell bent upon spoiling the Garden of Eden for her, but Joshua was no Adam. Right from the get-go, Joshua and Heather's relationship was strained. Whether Amelia's sweet yet poisonous venom had anything to do with it is not certain, but things did eventually come to a head for the married couple. It was rumored that at the time of the slaying, Amelia was 8 months pregnant with a child presumed to be Joshua Fulgham's, which seems proof positive that she hadn't thrown in the towel. Heather soon realized that marriage to Joshua was not going to be a bed of roses, and the constant fights between them took a turn for the worse when Joshua became physical in his aggressiveness. Their relationship began seesawing between good days of being able to get along and fighting, which would break out over the smallest things and turn into physical maltreatment. While Heather would take refuge at her parents' home from the mistreatment she was receiving from her husband, she would be forced to go back to him for the sake of her children. It was obvious to the whole community that Heather Strong was stuck in a mistreating relationship, and she had a target on her back put there firmly by her cheating husband. All of this went on until January 2009, when 6 weeks after their marriage, Fulgham was arrested for threatening Strong with a shotgun. By that time, Strong had sought at least 2 domestic violence injunctions against Fulgham.
Josh's sister and Josh's family knew that he was involved. After he confessed, he told the fact that she didn't get arrested.
We asked her if she was willing to help us catch Amelia.
The totality of the case with Amelia was riding on her conversation with Michelle, and we needed that directly from her.
We drove to a place near Amelia's house
so that she can find out actually what we know based off the listening and recording device that we had placed in Michelle's car. Amelia went there to get direction, to find out what was going on, and to make sure that Josh kept his mouth shut.
So I want detail. It would be better knowing than not knowing.
She had to give a little bit to get that she felt she was going to get a little bit. At that point, we were sitting in the car, and I remember looking over at Spivey, and it was like what we wanted.
After we were convinced that we had heard everything we needed to hear for an official interview.
Hey, is that chair comfortable for you?
As Detective Bowie starts to interview her, he didn't mention to her that we had this recording.
Once in September 2008 and again in January of 2009. He went to jail due to his latest stunt, from where Joshua continued to call up Heather and harass her into withdrawing her complaint. While Joshua was in jail, Amelia visited him numerous times, and they ended up rekindling their relationship. Oddly enough, both Amelia and Joshua's mother were on good terms with Heather as well. Amelia and Joshua's mother were fighting to get Joshua released from jail, and they asked Heather to write a letter on Joshua's behalf numerous times. Heather refused. At one point, Amelia grew so angry about Heather's refusal that she pulled Heather's hair and held a knife to her neck. A mutual friend, James Akome, was able to intervene and separate the 2 women. That detail comes from one of the many reports that law officers prepared after Heather's body was found. There is no indication that Strong ever reported the assault to law enforcement. Interestingly, Jamie Akome, one of Carr's ex-boyfriends and father of one of her children, told detectives that Carr wanted Strong, quote, out of the way, because she knew Fulgham would, quote, eventually go back to Heather regardless of what him and Amelia was going through, unquote. Heather and James began dating shortly after the incident and moved in together in late January 2009. Joshua was released from jail a week later. The gloves finally came off, and Carr and Fulgham had already re-established their relationship openly. The marriage was over, leaving Strong free to see someone else. Or was it? There was something much more precious at stake now: Strong and Fulgham's children. The broken marriage set off a vicious legal battle between both exes, and at the center of the storm was the custody of their 2 kids. Shortly after Josh was released from jail, Amelia informed him that Heather had plans to leave the state with their children. On February 15, 2009, Joshua asked his mother to help him compose a letter for Heather to sign that would grant him full custody of their children. Later that afternoon, Joshua's mother said that she saw Joshua and Heather leaving her home together in Joshua's car. When Heather's boyfriend returned to their apartment that evening, he noticed that all of Heather's items were missing from the apartment. He later received a voicemail from Joshua that said that Heather had gotten back together with him. Heather was never been seen or heard from again. She was reported missing by her family members on February 24, 2009. An act most foul. On February 15, 2009, then 26-year-old Heather Strong had disappeared. The dedicated mom and breadwinner of 2 young children never took days off from work.
You got a blue one, yeah.
She was a single mother raising 2 kids, always showed up for work. And I don't know what was said, I don't think Miss Brenda knows either, but she knows that it upset Heather.
Keep the kids away from him.
I try to pride myself answers. I'm that person. I'm very, very nosy. I'm not going to accept whatever statement that they've given me. I'm going to dig a little bit deeper. That's a criminal. Your white man, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, I'm just wore out. I get up for him.
He actually indicated that he believed she was in Mississippi.
And Heather always coming home.
And after this, no one else has seen her or knows where she's at.
There's a brick wall along down there. She was standing right over there. And she had a red suitcase that's pull out, maybe.
And then you got back in your car?
And I went back to the house.
And when you left, she was...
They got cameras all around it.
No video.
Of what?
Of Heather.
With a female named Amelia Carr.
Me and my mom, we opened the door and there's 2 detectives standing there.
She had been employed at an Iron Skillet restaurant at a petrol gas station next to Interstate 75 in Reddick. Her friend and co-worker Jennifer Hassenfuel was witness to Heather's commitment to her profession, and when she did not show up for work without leaving word, her employers and co-workers had a niggling feeling that something bad had happened. The situation was taken extremely seriously by Lieutenant Chris Voracek and Sergeant Brian Spivey of Marion County Sheriff's Office when, in a phone call, Heather's mother, Carolyn Spence, insisted that her daughter always spoke to her on the day of her birthday, which had passed a couple of days earlier without her contacting her family. The custody letter. Suspecting foul play, the team started conducting interviews, and the first person to be hauled in for questioning was Joshua Fulgham. Lead investigator was Detective Donald Bowie of the Marion County Sheriff's Office. When he was approached by the detectives, he showed them a typewritten document in which Heather had given full custody to her ex-husband by her own free will and had signed the document. It was a highly dubious piece of evidence which actually did not help Joshua's case. Detective Bowie proceeded to put Joshua Fulgham under the microscope and confronted him directly about the validity of the custody letter he had shared with them. Without mincing any words, the detective told Joshua that while it was his contention that Heather had just woken up one fine morning and decided that Joshua could take better care of her kids, the testimony they had from Heather's friends, family, and her co-workers contradicted his statements directly. According to witnesses, Heather had received a phone call from Joshua a day before her disappearance, from which she had been particularly distressed. She had shared with her close friends that she needed to keep her kids safe from Joshua and had to take Joshua out of their lives to accomplish that.
She said she wanted to get the hell out of Dodge. Wanted me to keep kids, but when she gets it cleared up, she's coming home back. But this time, I'm not taking her back.
Knowing that Josh had picked up Heather and she had rid Josh as the last one to see her before she went missing.
Now at the Petro, where was she hanging out at?
Right there at Petro.
Standing up there at Petro. You know there's video at Petro, right? That Petro, on that date, all day, all night.
The credit card theft. During his interrogation about Strong's whereabouts, detectives discovered that a man in the coveralls of a local lawn mowing company had used Heather's credit card. They were able to identify him as Heather's ex-husband. Now they knew that Fulgham had illegally used Strong's credit card after Strong went missing. That put Joshua right on the radar of law enforcement. When they confronted Joshua Fulgham about it, he denied ever using Heather's credit card, but once faced with a video footage of him walking up to the ATM and using the card, he had to own up to his lie and his theft. It was the lying that raised the suspicions of the officers, and he knew that his goose was well and truly cooked. Thus, the web of deceit surrounding Heather's fate started unraveling, and the first to pull a thread in his stupidity was Joshua Fulgham. Joshua taking Heather's cards gave a completely new perspective to the motive behind Strong's disappearance. It had always been about the money, and love had nothing to do with it. Faced with a daunting prospect of paying child support for decades to come, Joshua had the primary motive to take Heather's life. The question was Amelia involved in any way? That is why Detective Bowie had both Joshua and Amelia seated in separate rooms and was interrogating them by turns.
So we were home and we were cooking dinner, and it had to be about 7 or 7:30, and we get a knock at the back door. I'm in for questioning regarding Heather Strong being missing, and I'm looking around, I'm like, and she would take the kids and then they would get back together for a little while, and then something would go wrong again, and because at the end of the day there was no animosity. We would hang out, just girl talk.
I'm 8 months.
So you're 8 months.
Yeah.
Okay. She was more calculated in everything that she said. She was aware that what she say may come back to bite her.
I mean, it'd be...
With your help, we're gonna find her.
The first crack. Meanwhile, in the other room, Detective Bowie was trying to work his charm on Amelia, who was not falling for even a little bit of it. Quite early on into the investigation, the detective realized what a Machiavellian and manipulative woman whom he had to deal with. As Detective Bowie tried to break down her defensive, Amelia stuck to her guns, insisting that she knew nothing about a custody letter, trying to charm the detective into lowering his guard and playing the sympathy card for the victim continuously. Her comfort, though, was about to come to an end as Detective Bowie kept digging at the weakest link, which was most obviously Joshua Fulgham. Under pressure from the detective over one thing or another, Fulgham finally cracked. Though he admitted to using Heather's card, he denied any involvement in her disappearance. He did, however, give detectives the name of someone who might have information about Strong, Amelia Carr, Fulgham's on-again, off-again girlfriend who was 8 months pregnant at the time. While Detective Bowie took Joshua out of the interrogation room to let him smoke a cigarette, he decided to come clean and shared information about his girlfriend Amelia, knowing more details about the entire incident than himself. He claimed to be innocent in the entire debacle, putting all of the blame with his partner, Amelia. What he did should serve as a reminder to everyone that a smart enemy is better than a foolish friend. He told Detective Sergeant Donald Bowie, quote, "This is what I was told by Amelia, that Heather's gone, leave it alone," unquote. Fulgham claimed that was all he knew about Strong's disappearance. The smart detective had recorded Fulgham's statements and shared the details with Amelia. When Amelia was confronted by her lover's claims, she acted completely astonished, claiming no knowledge of whatever had happened between Heather Strong and Joshua Fulgham. The tide has turned. Detective Bowie said they did not have enough evidence to charge Fulgham with the slaying and instead decided to arrest him for the unlawful use of a credit card. But before he was transported to jail, Fulgham asked Detective Bowie a startling question. Holding out his wallet, Fulgham said, quote, "You let me take this by my mama if I take you to her?" unquote. Detective Bowie promised that if Fulgham took him to where Heather was, he would take his wallet to his mama. The game was up. It was time for Bonnie and Clyde to face the music, but first, Fulgham had to take the police to Heather's grave. He then got into a police vehicle and directed detectives to Carr's home, where he said Strong was located.
Downfall was thinking that she was smarter than everybody else, that were as smart or smarter than she was.
She still points to blame. Cold-hearted person that she displays. Is that deep down inside of her? She just won't tell the truth.
Everybody asks me that. No. And I wish she was here. You know? The struggle of loving your kids
Heather came home. It's surreal how peaceful things look once a tragedy like the taking of a person's life has passed. Detective Sergeant Mike Mongaluzzo remembered getting out of the car with Fulgham in handcuffs. It was dark, it was a very overgrown piece of property, and Josh led the way. They walked down a trail back to an old dilapidated trailer. When they made it around the trailer, the detective remembered grabbing a long stick from out of the debris and started sticking it around this pile. And immediately when he stuck it into the ground, it went down several inches very easily, and he immediately knew that was a grave. He just knew. After obtaining a search warrant, authorities began digging through Carr's property while Fulgham said goodbye to his mother and children and was taken to jail. Back at Carr's house, Detective Bowie grabbed a shovel and started, one scoop at a time, digging until he saw Heather's face. No matter how lifeless a person is, the humanness cannot be taken away by too much exposure to demise. The detective had a weird feeling to look at someone that was someone's mother, daughter. He had to check himself and knew it was time to hold the person that was responsible for it accountable. Her body had been disposed of unceremoniously. The grave had been an extremely shallow one, just a disturbance in the ground where the bag was dumped and a floorboard was placed over her face, before loose dirt was piled on top. That day, detectives observed the clumsy efforts to dispose of Strong's body. Clad in a t-shirt and jeans, the 5'6" corpse had been partially stuffed into a large zip-up suitcase and placed in a 3-foot deep hole. The hole was covered by 2 pieces of wood and black plastic bags to ward off flies. If the method of burial was slipshod, the manner of death suggested a cold indifference to human life. Without wasting any time, the detectives actually knocked at Amelia's door to wake her up and ask her once again to come down to the station. She was informed that Heather Strong's body had been found on her property and knew that her number was up. The minute she entered the interrogation room with the detective, she turned the tables on the love of her life, going so far as to offer to testify against Joshua Fulgham. She informed the detective that on the 16th of February at 5 a.m. in the morning, Joshua had knocked on her window, woken her up, and told her that he had done something to Heather Strong. When confronted by the detectives about why she had not spoken of this sooner, she claimed that she had never believed that Joshua could do something like that, which is why she had kept her peace. It was obvious to the detectives that there was a lot more to the story which was unraveling thread by thread, and soon the entire stark truth would become apparent to everyone, with no dirty details hidden. This was only the first step towards the truth, and they would have the entire story and all its gory details. With all the characters who had participated in bringing Heather Strong's life to a premature end coming to light, it was only a matter of time before they got their comeuppance. Tying up loose ends. The tide had almost definitely turned, and it had turned against the 2 persons responsible for the horror that had been unleashed on Heather Strong. The case had already been blown wide open by the extreme hard work and tenacity of the detectives. All that was left was for the culprits to turn against each other, which was already happening. It seemed that Amelia was not done with changing her story. As the detectives went back to the interrogation room, they found Amelia sitting with the captain.
We knew that Josh had lived with her for a time.
They would be great together for a little while, and then they would separate and she would leave. It was just not a healthy relationship at all.
We learned that Amelia already had 3 children and was currently 8 months pregnant, being that this was Josh's child.
Hey, you coming up here?
You look tired too.
Very tired. Appreciate you coming up here. How far along are you? Some differences and get a clear understanding. Okay. Amelia was a thinker. Well, we're gonna find her with your help. Your help.
And I'm here to help. I mean, we've got kids who need both parents.
Okay, you know, you don't want something to bite you in the behind if you know something.
I know.
Okay?
I'm sitting there and I'm waiting for them to come in and say whatever they have to say so I can go home.
And telling them a new side to the sorry tale. This time, she confessed to the detectives that Joshua had confessed to Amelia that he had done away with Heather by hitting her over the head with something. He had also informed her that he had brought Heather back to her property, but when Amelia went to investigate Joshua's claims and entered her mother's trailer, she was greeted by the sight of Heather duct taped with her arms and legs to a chair, and she realized that she had passed away. At this point, she told the detectives and the captain that Joshua had actually told her that he had taken Heather's life, confessing his part in what had happened to her. The night before, she had sworn to Detective Sergeant Mike Mongaluzzo, with tears streaming down her face, that she had given him each and every piece of information she had regarding what had happened to Heather. But she had turned around once again and revealed that she knew more about the entire story. The detective confronted her with her pack of lies and told her summarily that she would be treated as a partner to Joshua's actions, particularly since she was hiding things from the authorities in such a serious matter. The detective then proceeded to grill Amelia about the turns her story had taken and how she had changed details again and again in her retellings. The detective confronted her about the unrealistic account she had given to the captain, in particular, her claim that she had stumbled upon Heather Strong's body on a chance trip to the trailer. The detective insisted that there was only one reason why Joshua had told her about having brought Heather to her mother's trailer, which was to make sure that no one ventured towards it and to get help from Amelia. The entire story had already become exposed. What the detectives are trying to do was to make sure that the two culprits turned against each other and testified to put each other behind bars, a scenario that suited the law enforcement and the victims' families the best. As the detective was tightening the noose around Amelia's neck, Detective Bowie was working Joshua over, trying to make him admit clearly to his part in the entire incident. They made it clear to the culprits that this was a race against time, and whoever decided to cooperate with law enforcement first would get leniency from the long arm of the law. The trump card the detective played against Amelia was to question her about her insistence on moving in with Joshua Fulgham, despite knowing that he had just taken the life of his ex-wife in her mother's trailer. To him, that was proof beyond the shadow of a doubt that this lady was involved in what had happened to Heather. To know clearly and to be witness to the pure evil a man was capable of, and still deem him worthy enough to be father to her children and to move in with him, took steel balls, and Amelia had plenty of those. It showed the detectives that she was no Miss Innocent. The watershed event. The investigation hit a standstill until Fulgham's sister, Michelle Gustafson, reached out to the police and agreed to get Carr to speak about her involvement in the slaying on tape. In the sting operation, Carr admitted to Gustafson that both she and Fulgham had slain Strong. What the authorities got was the full Monty, with Amelia giving out details of what had happened to her sister-in-law. The gruesome details came out, which painted a bleak and horrifying picture. Detectives then picked up Carr and brought her in for a final interview, and she admitted to being with Fulgham when Strong took her last breath. The trial and sentencing. The truth about Heather's tragic fate was finally revealed at Amelia's trial. She ultimately admitted that Joshua lured Heather to the storage trailer on Amelia's family's property on February 15th. After Joshua and Heather entered the trailer, Amelia followed them inside. Frightened, Heather attempted to exit the trailer, but Joshua wrestled her back inside.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, buddy.
And then you got back in your car?
And I went back down.
You know there's video at Petro, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, they got cameras all around it.
No video. Hey.
Hey.
Tired?
Exhausted. About my bedtime.
Coming up here. Understand, you're not pressured to be here. This is all voluntary. Trying to get some things together, we try to sort out some differences and get a clear understanding.
Amelia then tied Heather to a chair as Joshua held her down. The pair forced Heather to sign a custody agreement that granted Joshua full custody of their children. Then both Amelia and Joshua unsuccessfully attempted to break Heather's neck. When that failed, Amelia placed a garbage bag over Heather's head, and Joshua put his hand over her mouth and nose, suffocating her to demise. Both Carr and Fulgham were charged with first-degree slaying and kidnapping. The prosecution argued that Fulgham had planned on slaying Strong after she threatened to take their children and leave the state. Out of loyalty to her boyfriend, the state contended Carr helped Fulgham carry out the murder. Though the detectives' take on this is a bit different, they believe that both the culprits had different motivations for why they did their part in the incident. While the motivation for Joshua had been surely one of greed, his concern being not to be held liable to pay financial support for his children's upbringing, to a certain degree, playing some sort of role in his children's lives also figured in.
Tell me the relationship between you, Josh, and Heather.
He wanted to work things out for his kids' sake, and we parted ways. And we just agreed that when you got 5 kids between you, between different people.
How many kids do you have?
3.
You got 3 kids?
Yeah. There wasn't really ever one. Excuse me. So we had some kind of contact, but I usually got distance.
Okay. Have you and her ever got into it about anything?
No. Well, when we had to be.
Right.
Couple days after he went to jail, so she could go to work. And
What? She likes you to babysit the kids?
She said, well, Mackenzie really likes you and she loves you and she'd rather you babysit him, so I was there for a feast living. I'm sorry.
So you hadn't seen her since, when was the last time you saw her?
That night I babysat, which was I don't remember if that was a Thursday or a Friday. So that Saturday had to be the 9th or the 10th.
Of January?
Yeah. Mom won't call, Mom won't make contact, nothing. And I mean, it's messed up. So, I mean, he's gone to they just trying to come after him, and he told them, he said, look, I don't even know where she's at. I've got the kids right now. It is a tangled up mess. We don't know where she's at.
On the other hand, Amelia's first and foremost concern was to remove Heather Strong entirely from the picture of Joshua's life and have him entirely to herself. Amelia Carr and Joshua Fulgham waived their right to a speedy trial in April of 2009. Prosecutor Rock Hooker immediately filed notice of his intent to pursue the demise penalty because of the heinous nature of the crime. In November of 2009, State Circuit Judge Willard Pope declined Amelia Carr's request for a continuance of the trial because of her concerns over the preparedness of defense attorney Candace Hawthorne. A jury found Carr guilty of first-degree slaying and kidnapping after 2.5 hours of deliberations on December 7, 2010. During the penalty phase of the trial, Carr's family testified on her behalf that she had been traumatized since her early childhood by carnal mistreatment from her father and grandfather. However, the jury voted 7-5 on December 10th in favor of the demise penalty for Carr. She was formally sentenced to demise by lethal injection on February 22, 2011. More than a year after Carr's conviction for the slaying of Heather Strong, her co-defendant Joshua Fulgham went on trial for his alleged participation in April 2012. Carr, on death row at the Lowell Correctional Institution Annex, would not testify at the trial. The prosecution detailed the gruesome aspects of the incident. Both the prosecution and Fulgham's defense attorneys agreed that the motives for Heather Strong's slaying were jealousy and betrayal. At the conclusion of his trial, Fulgham was convicted of first-degree slaying and kidnapping. Despite the death sentence of his co-defendant, Joshua's jury voted 8-4 to sentence him to life in prison without the jury's recommendation. Carr also became the first woman to be sentenced to death in Marion County since the 1992 sentencing of Eileen Wuornos. On May 19, 2017, Amelia Carr was resentenced to life without parole. In 2017, Amelia appealed her sentence and was ultimately resentenced to life without parole.
Everyone in prison will tell you they're innocent. A confession beat out of them by law enforcement.
They befriend you. They just want to clear this up. They want to clear your name.
Yes, I was told prior to trial and the day that the trial began, because I didn't accept the plea because I wasn't gonna sign my life away for something I didn't do.
Somewhere about the 10th, 11th, or 12th of February.
Just a lot of things growing up. Our children is where we were closer.
Never give up. Ever the manipulator, Amelia Carr continues to claim her innocence from behind bars and has been using the media to create a storm in favor of clemency for herself. In an ABC News program, the mother of 4 protested her innocence and attacked the prison system for locking up minorities and poor people. How many rich people go to prison? Carr asked 2020 interviewer Diane Sawyer. Unfortunately, equality is an illusion. Her plea for clemency provoked nothing but anger and cynicism, however, in the former family home of Heather Strong, her victim. In an exclusive interview with Daily Mail Online, Heather's loved ones insisted that Demise Row is the only appropriate place for an evil, manipulative slayer, irrespective of age and gender. And they expressed outrage at how the pretty convict has been turned into a TV celebrity while their voices have gone unheard. Meanwhile, Heather Strong's grieving mother has accused the press and people of having it all wrong. She said in an interview, quote, "They wanted the kids, they wanted welfare. They made out at the time that this was some sort of love triangle, but it wasn't anything of the sort," unquote. And that's all that we have for you today, folks. Join us next time at the next one.